Welcome to the Dental Marketing Guy Show. I'm Justin, the Dental Marketing Guy, and today we've got a really great guest. I'm excited to introduce this guy because let me tell you, I saw him at the county meeting, and almost nobody in dentistry is as entertaining and lively and as enthusiastic about growing your practice. This is a really big deal, guys. We're going to talk about behavioral economics, which, if you're a dentist, you're already really smart when it comes to a lot of things. I hope we can educate you on behavioral economics throughout this series and what that means for your practice. A lot of times you've got everything down. You've got the Krebs cycle, you've got the chemistry, you've got all this different stuff down. But when it comes to the psychology of your patients, we want to make sure you're empowered to do all the right things in your marketing. So Chris Moriarty, Chris, I'm having trouble with the last name right now.
No problem. It's Moriarty, yeah.
All right, excellent. Chris Moriarty. And man, it is such an honor to introduce you to the viewers. Could you tell us a little bit of your history, how you got into Productive Dentist Academy and all that jazz?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to see you at Townie. And again, my hat's off to Howard and the whole gang for giving me the invite to speak at all. My history is a little bit abnormal for the dental profession. I actually started by working with attorneys. And then after working with attorneys, I started working with MDs and surgeons on everything from the adoptions of technologies, preservation of relationship, but most importantly, what I found myself being more and more surrounded by was just folks who wanted to help people change. And so in the successes that I got a call from a pharmaceutical company in Oregon who was trying to help dentists change, trying to help them bring technologies into their practices, help them communicate to patients why they needed to change. And before then, I hadn't really thought that much about it. And that was 8 years ago, and just fell in love with the industry. So in helping these practices grow, the company itself started sponsoring PDA events. And so all of a sudden, my love for science and business and economics kind of all came together. So I wound up joining them about 5 years ago, and we've been growing practices ever since.
And, Productive Business Academy, to quite the reputation in the dental community. Could you tell us a little bit of history for those of the viewers who haven't really heard of it, though?
Yeah, absolutely. So the PDA was originally started by Dr. Bruce Baird about 12 years ago now. He kind of hit the scene because he was producing an incredible amount of dentistry almost in spite of where he was. He practices in a small town in Texas called Granbury, literally 4,000 people in the whole town. But for the last 15 years, he's been working 2 days a week, producing between $2,000 and $3,000 an hour in dentistry, doing primarily bread and butter dentistry. Now, to make that even more interesting, the county only has 45,000 people in it, and his average new patient drives between 75 and 100 miles to come and see him. So what folks what they wanted to know was, how do you do that? And so Bruce kind of took a page out of John Kois's playbook. And if you followed John Kois clinically, his approach to treatment planning was so wonderful because he put everything on the backbone of these risk factors. Just follow the risk factors and the clinical outcome will be better for it. So Bruce did the same thing effectively with communication, because every single dentist I've ever worked with is incredibly intelligent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're very eloquent. They didn't want to be salesy. We didn't want them to be salesy. We only wanted them to be who they were, but they didn't know how to effectively communicate with that patient. So putting everything on the backbone of these risk factors made communication seamless. Because we always tell folks, do the patients need the work or not? Would they be in a better position having a healthier mouth? The answer is always yes. So how do we bring them down that road for more comprehensive treatment? And that's what he started teaching. Now, to make a long story longer, we started with dentists because we believed that most of the change in the office was going to be driven by the leader, by the owner, and that was true. But who are all those people around them making that possible? It's the team. So a couple years into it, he wound up partnering with Vicki McManus, who now owns 6 dental practices of her own, and that's where the team component came into play, teaching them how to proper delegation, training, handoffs, all that kind of thing. Because in the PDA way, day in and day out. Basically, I need the doctor doing two things. One, spending as much time as they need to developing relationships with their patients. And number two, doing A+ clinical dentistry. End of list. That's the only thing they have the mental space for, everything else to be properly delegated. So between Vicky and Patty, our director of coaching, that's what we do day in and day out, is just help these offices run seamless. Because one of the things that you said earlier, very few of these offices have capacity for lack of components. They have great teams. They have the clinical skill. They have all the parts. It's just how do you make some subtle changes to make things more effective? And that's what behavioral economics does. And that's my passion. It's how can we make small twists and small tweaks to make sure that when patients are deciding, do I go to this office or your office? Am I willing to drive 50 miles? I never thought I'd ever drive 100 miles to see a dentist, and now they will. How do you influence that behavior to make sure patients are getting the level of care that they deserve?
You know, actually, it's funny. On Dental Town, just the other day, there was a thread, and the dentist was, I don't know if he was lamenting or just remarking on it, but he said there was a tattoo artist in his, it's funny, I didn't think most dentists get tattoos, but he was saying there's a tattoo artist, and he was on some TV series, and he's got a line around the block for 4 months. But then 100 miles away, there's a tattoo artist, and that's the one that he goes to. I don't know if most dentists get tattoos, so I don't know how relatable that is.
More than we probably think.
You just can't see them, right? They're not on the neck.
Yes, yet.
They don't have the full that. But yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, we're talking about behavioral economics, and maybe you could kind of talk about like what the definition of that is, and talking about the psychology of consumer behavior and how that affects our viewers.
Yeah, sure. And I always tell the same story, you know, kind of how you even found my way into behavioral economics. So it all kind of started when I was in grad school, and I was in a bar, like many students tend to be, and this gentleman started chatting, just chatting at a young lady, just trying to have a conversation. And I'll never forget it because he says to her, like a lot of people did, he goes, don't I know you from somewhere? And without missing a beat, she doesn't even look up. She goes, yeah, and that's why I don't go there anymore. And it was the whole place, just the air got sucked out of it. It dropped like 10 degrees. It was icy cold. But, you know, those things happen. But about 5-10 minutes later, a gentleman of almost identical description comes up. He starts up a conversation and all this fell. So what was the difference? Why the second guy, not the first guy? And of course, the moral of the story is I became very interested in this because I was that first guy. So I wanted to know what that second guy did differently than I did to get that outcome, right?
Right.
So that opened the door. But then all of a sudden you started seeing it just in almost every conversation you've had your entire life. People have these impulses, they have these opinions, they have these thoughts, and they don't necessarily know where they came from. Like, why will somebody pay 20% more for Nike shoes and they wouldn't even consider Adidas? You know, why do they love BMW but not Mercedes? You know, how do we start to factor some of these different things in? You know, one component that really kind of links back to dentistry is there's a facet of behavioral economics called cultivation theory. And again, that's just the study of where these thoughts, feelings, and opinions come from. And what we find is primarily a lot of the opinions that we have, the core, the root of them, is actually based on fiction. A primary example that I always talk about is I was a child of the 80s. So in every movie I ever saw, the bad guys were always the Russians, the Soviets. We were always against the communists. And if you say the word Russia to me at any point in time, when I picture it, it's always winter. Always. Like I never picture there being summer there. And that's just where I've been conditioned over time to, that's Russia to me in my mind. And so when it comes to dentistry, and especially even though there have been so many advances, we're still up against a lifetime of this cultivation effect. People thinking that a dental experience is going to be X. Especially when it comes to things like endo or some serious restorative work, they have absolutely no idea what can happen anymore. They think they know a person that something bad has happened to. We've all heard the story of the doctor putting his knee into a patient's chest to do the extraction. I would love Snopes or somebody to run that story down because I can almost guarantee it never happened, or it happened in the 1800s, but everyone seems to know someone who that happened to.
It wasn't a dentist, it was a barber.
Oh, there you go. So, and this is all of those things where we want to start running that back down. So when I'm talking to an office about marketing, usually what they're trying to do, or I should say a bad habit, is they instantly start to try to replicate something that they've seen someone else do. They look for who's successful in dentistry. What does their marketing look like? Well, then I should do that. So they try to it becomes this sort of regurgitated copy of a copy of a copy that ultimately becomes anonymous. And so in some of the things that I've learned, we run doctors through a variety of different exercises to kind of pull back the layers of the onion, if you will, and figure out, number one, what are they really trying to do? Who do they really communicate well with? Because every dentist I've ever spoken to will tell you they've sat across from patients and it just clicked. They hit that rhythm, they're laughing at the same jokes, the patient understands what their needs are, and they're able to say yes to treatment. And they've also had the opposite, where that person sits down there and it is rough. It's difficult for them to come to conclusion no matter how many times they explain it. So then what do? They start to backpedal. They're pulling out the articulator, they're pulling out these models, they're going back to the intraoral camera, and they just can't seem to get on the same page. So some of the things that we do is try to figure out what type of messaging can you put out to where we have a better shot at attracting the people who communicate like you do, who value the same things that you do. And it's pretty subtle. It's incredibly effective when it's done well.
That's really interesting. And so, always when you're dealing with psychology, you're talking about something that can't necessarily be explained in 2 seconds. So we're kind of talking bird's eye view here. But maybe could you provide maybe like 2 or 3 quick tips as far as like, I'm a dentist, I'm watching the Dental Marketing Guy show. I'm hearing what you're saying, Chris. Sounds great. Maybe I contact PDA in the future, but right now what I'm wondering is, what can I do this week or this month or today to really kind of jumpstart this thought process and kind of get me started on that road of, why do people choose BMW but not Mercedes and things like that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different kind of ad hoc assessments that people can do anytime. One is I have them write down literally, so anybody listening to this, you can do this right now. I want you to write down the animals: cow, tiger, sheep, horse, and pig. You can write them down in any order that you want. But when you do, after you have that list, I want you to rank them from 1 to 5, 1 being the animal that just jumped out most, whether it be your favorite, whichever one you're most drawn to. And this is an assessment that I've been doing for a long time to kind of figure out what's really one of those subconscious emotional drivers of this doctor. And what you'll find on this list, and again, if you're playing along at home, I'll try to go through some of these just so you can kind of see how this works. You can do it with your team, you can do it with all kinds of stuff. But most of the time in dentistry, tiger is number 1. And of course, in grad school and in all the literature, we put all those electrodes on people's brains. You say certain words, it lights up different areas, and that's how we make these connections. But the folks who pick tiger are the part of their psyche that's most prevalent for them is this element of pride. Now, pride seemingly is a good thing to have. It's what makes sure that they're doing top quality work. They agonize over those details, and when it goes well, they feel incredibly rewarded. Now, what winds up happening, though, is in dentistry is what we call the assumption of aptitude, meaning that patients have in no way the ability to truly appreciate any level of clinical artistry. The only thing they can really appreciate is if they're in pain, out of pain, or if it's just an obvious aesthetic fix, veneers or something like that. So with these doctors who've spent their entire life figuring out how to do these things and do these things well, the dentists, these guys are amazing. When a patient says no to their treatment plan or asks the wrong questions to a treatment plan, it dings them hard in that pride. Now, that's something that is fairly, of course that's going to happen, and of course it is. I'm not saying the reaction's bad. Where this becomes problematic is when they go into the next operatory. They tend to carry that with them through the rest of the day. And ask your team, if you were somebody who is a tiger, they'll reinforce the same thing. And what we can't do is have that happen. You got to shut that door. In the PDA, we call it a 1-act play, meaning as you go to that next operatory, it's a reset. Because that patient deserves you at 100%. And you got to remind yourself, this is your tiger coming through. Now, I'll jump to one more. I always ask how many folks put down pig. And pig, of course, is the one that's most closely associated with money. And it's always the smallest percentage of the room, which is fascinating, because what's the name of our company? The Productive Dentist Academy, right? Production, money, increasing money, and all those things. And what people will find out at the end of the day, it's actually one of the things that's the least important to them. They want to be successful, but feeling successful and feeling wealthy are completely two different things. In fact, they're hardly related at all. Like, they want to feel appreciated. They want their patients to understand what it went through to do this work and take care of them at such a high level. The money's just a byproduct of that. One of the things that Bruce will always say is that if you take amazing care of people, the money will take care of itself. And for the most part, that's exactly what we find. So as this relates to marketing, what do we see? We see a lot of guys who are so proud of their accomplishments that when I go to their websites, what do I see? I see that just all the acronyms. I see that whole big alphabet behind their name because they're so proud. I tell you to go out and ask 100 patients what any of those mean. They don't have a clue.
I mean, that could be really confusing.
Yeah, I mean, they've never been put in a position to be able to appreciate what that means. So then they go one step further. They put all their associations up there, whether it be the AACD or the AGD. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So here's what we tell people to do. If you are a tiger and you have those accomplishments, we absolutely want you to be proud. But how do you turn that into a consumer experience that they can participate in? Because you can't raise that flag and run around town saying that you're the best. Can't say that, can you? But what we can do is teach the patients the questions to ask. So I'm envisioning a blog post now or a pay-per-click ad that says, considering implants, the questions I would ask before I did so. And these questions, of course, are designed with intention to say, I would make sure I would want the person placing the implants to have attended these courses, to have done these things and all that stuff. And what we're doing is, of course, leading them down a road to where the answer is the providing doctor or the one who's most apt. So, but it's difficult for them to come to those conclusions, but you see it being done all over the place. And that's where I really push on dentistry really hard. I tell them, you got to get out of our profession. Dentistry is about this big, and we haven't been marketing for that long. So you got to look at the guys who've been doing this forever. In fact, one good example of things you don't necessarily know what's happening is that we want intelligence. We want predictability. You've all seen like the Geico commercials or whatnot, where they'll run a quote for you and they'll say, hey, sometimes we're the best deal in town and sometimes we're not. But what they're really doing is checking to see who you are as a driver, because an insurance company makes more money when they're not paying claims. So when they run a driver's profile and they're higher risk, they're going to show you a cheaper option that's not them. They're pushing bad clients away. You don't think so here, though. To the world, what's their message? Oh my gosh, we're benevolent. We care so much about your bottom line that, hey, we might not be the best option. And that is not what's happening ever, but that is masterful marketing. Because even if you're turned away, you're like, hey, you know what? I went to Geico. They actually found that it was cheaper for me to go with Progressive. They're amazing. No, they're not. They're not amazing one bit. They figured out that you don't get to play on their team because you're a bad driver. So they jack their prices up to push you out to preserve their profit margin. This is all the kinds of stuff that's happening, and it's super clever, but the average Joe on the street would never know. So those are some of the types of things that we're trying to bring in. We're not trying to be subversive. More than likely what we're just trying to do is lend to that predictability, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's really incredible. I thought in a sense, I thought Progressive or Geico, whoever it is that's doing that, I thought they were just saying, look, we are benevolent and we're so honest. Therefore, the consumer says, oh, well, they must pay claims more easily. Because they're so honest in the sales process. When you become a customer, it's got to be that much better.
Exactly. How wonderful are they? And that's great and it's interesting when you find other people that do what I do. It all comes down to numbers and how do you tell a different story with those numbers. Another great example is if you go to your local supermarket and they give you a little discount card and you swipe it every time and you get, rather than swiping coupons, you just kind of get them and everyone loves it. But what's really happening there is they're gathering consumer data. And there's guys like me who are so good at what they do that just with basic demographic information, they can predict within 90% accuracy every single thing within your refrigerator. They're that good. But in dentistry, we rarely see an office that takes those steps, that looks at their patient pool. And number one, they don't have the time to do this 90% of the time. They're not bad business owners. They've just never really thought and asked these questions. So if you're using whether it's Solution Reach or Smile Reminder or a company like that, a lot of them have these mapping functions to where they can show you exactly where every single one of your patients lives. They put the little pin on the map. It's great. So they need to look at that because they need to figure out why. Nothing is by chance. What are you doing to attract people from that area? Now, the knee-jerk reaction that most people do, and this is wrong, where let's just say your town is in quadrants, and to the northwest, you just own it. 90% of your patients are coming from the northwest. So what they try to do is go everywhere they're not, thinking they're going to increase their market share. And that's not what you do. You create a singularity. You pour where you are most successful and you dominate that thing, and it'll spill over to the other regions. But you got to know who those people are, what they're doing, why they're coming to you, what services they're offering, and what's the lifetime value with the patient. So numbers are crazy things. You know, one of the, I love, again, looking at other industries and how we come to certain conclusions. And if folks listening were old enough to remember when Ralph Nader wrote his book back in the 60s about consumer protections, it's what led to seatbelts being mandated in every car. Seemed like a good idea, right? Cars are dangerous. Seatbelts save lives. People should have to have seatbelts. That was the common reaction. That's your common economist, right? Now, a behavioral economist got a hold of this information, and he said, I predict that, yes, there will be fewer driver fatalities, but there will be more accidents, and there will be more pedestrian fatalities. This is what he predicted. And as you can imagine, they tracked all this data, and he was absolutely right. Because what did that seatbelt do? It gave them a false sense of security. It made them think, I am safer now, so I can take more risks, right? So the driver was safer, but they hit more people and there were more crashes. Now, what made this really interesting, and I loved it, is this guy's presenting his findings, and he said, I can bring automotive fatalities, accidents, and pedestrian accidents down to almost zero within 1 month if Congress would let me. Yeah. And all of a sudden, we're like, this sounds fantastic. And do you remember what the recommendation was? He said
it was some sort of spear pointing out of the.
Exactly. It was a metal spike that came out from the steering wheel and ended about 2 inches from the driver's throat. Like, so where all of a sudden you can inherently increase the risk and make people safer. And it's just, that's one of the ways that we try to break people out of the commonality of their thinking. You know, if I've got this, everything's going to be okay. Well, maybe not. What do the numbers say? And we got to run back the numbers. Every time.
That's really incredible, because I'm always preaching this. I do SEO for dentists, and I'm always preaching this, that SEO is not the Hail Mary you think it is. Mm-hmm. But maybe it is. For some practices, you're going to get 150 new patients per month, and they're all doing all on 4. You know, for other practices, you're not getting 1 patient per year, and there's a lot of variables there. So yeah, that's really incredible. You know, is that analogy, I would have never thought that would relate to dental, but that's an incredible analogy, and it all has to do with you know, the amount of responsibility a person takes. So if a dentist takes responsibility for following up on those calls that SEO brought them, yeah, he's going to get more patients. But if he doesn't do that, if it's kind of like the seatbelt in a way, it's like, well, I'm doing SEO, so
I guess I'm okay. And yes, and that's exactly what we find, is this lack of capability and this lack of pass-through when it comes to the tracking. And I've made this mistake myself. This actually was maybe 2 years ago. We had a client call up and just kind of walking through some numbers. What are they doing that we don't know about, that kind of thing. And they were spending, I want to say it was somewhere around $1,200 a month on Yellow Pages, okay? And Yellow Pages has done some great things for people. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, according to my numbers here, you've gotten 10 patients from this all year. And I reacted. I said, dump it. Get it out of there. I should have caught this earlier. I even apologized to them while we were going to figure out what other avenue they should go on. And then actually one of the coworkers said, well, whoa. Who were those 10 patients? And lesson learned, we checked it out. About half of them were folks who did a considerable amount of dentistry. And that's the whole thing. We're so emotionally driven. And that's what a big part of course, behavioral economics is we got to get ourselves out of these behavioral patterns of just reacting to those different things, accept and develop proper plans that get us out of our own way and get more predictability. One example that I talk about in my lectures, somebody who knows their industry inside and out, believe it or not, is the airlines. You know, Coyce talks about failures. Everyone talks about failures. And I, of course, pull that back from the clinical sense. And I want to know when we get at-bats, meaning case presentations, where are we falling short in every which way? And so one of the things we talked about earlier was this delegation, you know, the team. Well, I don't care if it's internal communication, external communication, internal marketing or external marketing, you got to have something backing that up. If you look at the airlines, again, if they even had a 1% failure rate, it would mean two crashes at every major airport every single day at 1%. How do they prevent that? Redundancy. They got backups on backups on backups. And that's been one of the biggest problems with marketing, whether it be SEO or web or direct mail or whatever. Everyone just kind of goes, they throw that dart against the wall, they put their seatbelt on and say, I'm doing marketing, and then they take off. There's nothing backing that up. Where is it leading them? How and why? And where are the layers? Where is that redundancy? Because if you have one marketing initiative, you're either going to be 100% successful or 100% if it's going to fail. So, I mean, it's one of those deals where you got to look at it and kind of get these influences from other avenues, from other industries.
Yeah, and that's incredible. You know, we had Dr. Christopher Phelps on the show. He talked about diversification. We were talking about tracking and diversifying, and how, you know, really when you leave no stone unturned, you're going to find the opportunity. But if you do leave one stone unturned, that could be the one thing. And I talked to dentists about this. Yeah, I mean, I talked to dentists about this, about SEO. They're like, well, what does it take? What's it going to take? How long is it going to take? Like, well, it could be the very first thing we do. We could edit that title tag, and in 3 seconds, you're ranked #1, and you're getting new patients. Or we might have to go down the list of 300 different things. It just depends, you know. So, but for those dentists who are like, you know, hey, you know, how long is this going to take? You know, we're 2 months in, we projected 9 months, and they're like, yeah, are we going to see? Like, well, we've still got 7 months worth of things to try, and then the next month, boom, ranked up
Absolutely.
high. You know, because it happened to be the one thing. Who knows what that one thing is?
Well, and keep in mind, and this is something that I always remind them, is there usually in any town, the dental office or a dentist themselves are one of the more successful people around. So you kind of get some clout. You get a little bit of extra leverage in certain arenas. What I have to remind them all the time, love or hate Google, you can't buy your way to the top, at least not effectively. And what I got to remind them all the time is that's in their best interest. We had an office up in Alaska who they were paying $14,000 a month to some company to get them #1 on Google. Okay. And as you can tell, since I'm telling the story, they weren't there. So they called us and they said, hey, what's the deal? We're paying all this money and we're not #1. And like yourself, I'm like, if there was a magic bullet for that, if there was a solution, believe me, we'd all have it. So we looked at it though, and what we found was sometimes it just comes down to hustle. They were getting out-reviewed about 19-1. They had very little social media presence. Things just weren't, like, they weren't active. They weren't putting up original content, all those things that Google tells us that they want. So we told them, as a matter of fact, like, I can appreciate the tactics that they're trying, but believe it or not, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you can't buy your way to the top. Otherwise, the larger entities, and I don't think they're good, bad, or otherwise, they're just a different style, but the Heartlands of the world, the Pacifics, the Midwests, you know, all those guys would simply just buy out the top slots. And Google has luckily came to the conclusion that that's not in the world's best interest. You know, originality should rise to the top, authenticity should rise to the top, and hopefully they never change that.
Yeah, and that's what they need to do in order to make Google successful, is provide the best search results possible. I always ask dentists, I say, well, why do you deserve to be on the top of Google? They're like, well,
I like that.
Because we're paying you, Justin, that's why. I'm like, that's
and it's true. And all these things help, you know, and it's one of those, we also get gentlemen who might be a little bit later in their career, where marketing really wasn't part of the game, and they're very, very frustrated about full parking lots in their town. And because we've gotten this conception that that marketing cheapens things. And I always tell people poor marketing or poor advertising cheapens things. What they're fearful of is participating in this race to the bottom. Everything's going to be cheaper, faster. Who can just give away whitening fast enough or whatever? And I go, and gentlemen like us, we tell people that often what marketing is doing is just letting people know about the level of quality and level of service that you provide your community. We had a gentleman down in a smaller town in Missouri who did not want to market, did not want a website, did not want anything. Was going to grow his practice kind of within his philosophies, we'll say. Well, he's a very, very high-tech office. And of course, he found out actually through church that a member of his congregation had driven almost 100 miles to have a procedure done that they could have done probably at a better quality in their town. And he was telling me the story, and he was very frustrated on behalf of the patient that they had to do that. He felt bad that they had to do that. And I said, well, doctor, how could they possibly have known? You know, that's what marketing is. I go, otherwise you're leaving it 100% to chance that this person just happened to have been talking about their dental health to somebody who happened to be one of your patients who even happened to know what that machine was. That's too much chance right there. I mean, that's part of what this is a service to your community. You got to let people know what they're doing. So part of what I do, I fly down to Cerritos, California, part of the LANAP trainings from time to time with Millennium. It's the same thing. If you've seen somebody have conventional gum surgery, it's a tough surgery and it's a tough recovery. LANAP is exponentially easier on the patient and the results are undoubtedly better. But I always ask these guys, you know, what's your plan? You know, to kind of spread the word. And $10,000 laser, I come up with a better plan. And of course, that's where guys like you and me can come in and help. But it's not just about body count.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you know, I always tell dentists, I say, look, being good at dentistry is doing the same-day crowns. It's getting the CEREC. It's learning those skills. But good marketing is actually a really revolutionary concept. It's telling people that you do it. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, to say the least, it's it's interesting. Another example that people can run at home is sometimes we'll say, if your practice was a car, what type of car would it be? And of course, they noodle on it for a little bit. And some people they're fast, they're speedy, they're Porsches. Other people, they'll say, no, we're outdoorsy. We're like a Jeep with the roof off and we have fun. And what we're really looking for in these questions is of course, tonality. You know, people who always want big, like SUVs and carriers, those are people who tend to really enjoy the community aspect. So their story, their narrative might really be that, you know, generations of patients, that type of story. But every now and again, more than you would probably guess, somebody says, our practice would be a Rolls Royce, and they're dead serious. And I appreciate what they're trying to say. What they're trying to say is nobody takes care of patients on the level that we do. But what I really stress to them is, number one, that's not authentic. Because if I come to your office, I better be greeted by a guy in white gloves and you better have solid gold toilets or you are not a Rolls Royce. But the reality is you don't have to be Rolls Royce. We run a lot of these exercises, and I use the example of BMW and Kia and Walmart and Nordstrom's. And I always end things with, I don't care if you're Nordstrom's, I don't care if you're Walmart, because both of those companies make billions with a B. What matters is that you're you, and only trying to be you, and trying to attract people that you get along with, and just people who want to meet you and want that type of care. You know, it's again. I push people to get outside their industry. And one of the things I'll do in a seminar is I'll wave my magic wand and I'll say, okay, for the next 10 minutes, nobody here is involved in dentistry anymore. And in fact, you all own car dealerships. Nice ones. BMW car dealerships, I tell them, and everybody nods. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And I say, business is good to boot. You're doing great. Now, one day you wake up and across the street, they're building a Kia dealership. How do you feel about that? Now, most people get where I'm going. So they'll say, oh, I'm not really worried about it. And I say, well, why are you not worried about the Kia dealership? And the answer is pretty obvious, because most people on their way to buy a BMW are more than likely not going to take a hard right into the Kia lot and steal that business. But maybe, just maybe, Someone on their way to get a Kia might do a little window shopping over in BMW, might pick up some business, but they're not really worried. So then I have them raise their hands and I say, now how many people in this room, I'm curious, have owned both a BMW and a Kia, preferably at the same time? And of course, the answer is almost nobody. In fact, I can't think of anybody who has. So I said, well, explain this to me then. How is it that I could give anybody in this room a piece of paper and you could easily write down 10 differences between BMW and Kia, however, nobody here has ever owned both? How's that possible? And the answer, of course, is marketing. The answer, of course, is that both of those companies have spent millions upon millions of dollars to make sure that everyone knows the difference. But again, the moral of the story is, I don't care if you're BMW, and I don't care if you're Kia, because they both make billions. The idea is to figure out who you are, what's the community that you serve, and then just serve the hell out of it. Be the best at that, and that's the real trick. So, I mean, you can tell, Kia's trying to have some nicer automobiles, but they're not trying to be BMW. They're really not. And I go, and that's why they're playing into their successes, and that's why they're still one of the fastest growing car companies in the country. So that's some of the modeling that I do. Get out, forget it's dentistry. Because every time a new office pops up in somebody's community, there's this reaction, there's this visceral emotional reaction. Oh, there's all this competition, like, oh, corporate dentistry is driving us out, and it's all this sky is falling sort of attitude. And I remind them, well, are you the BMW dealership or the Kia dealership? And I don't care, but who are they in this scenario? Walk through that and just come up with a plan to make sure people know the difference. Absolutely.
And some of the most and this is really, really good stuff. This is why I wanted to have you on the show is, you're delving deep into the psychology, and this is just the surface level, but you're delving deep into the psychology of, just what people think and why marketing actually affects people's perceptions of things. And, but a lot of times I speak with dentists and it's not even that deep a level. It's they have a CEREC and none of their patients know it. So they go down they go to doctor down the street and he advertises same-day crowns. So here we are,
I love it. And the CEREC's one a super fun tool. It's one of the things that, depending on where people are, it's interesting who they're actually competing with. Some I'll say offices in maybe more affluent areas, they're competing with plastic surgery. All the discretionary spending on aesthetics is going to some of these other avenues. They might be competing against a facelift or liposuction or whatever this may be. So we actually ran a campaign for a gentleman in Aspen where he had a CEREC, and it's a cool piece of technology, and it was a billboard. And the billboard said, Dr. So-and-so, come in and ask me about my time machine. Nothing will make you look 20 years younger faster. Now that's an interesting use of technology because nobody knows what the CEREC machine looks like by and large. All they know, and you've seen this as you've seen people doing, I don't care if it's, 5 units, 6 units, 8 units, whatever it is, but they're walking out of that in the same day smile situation and they easily look 20 years younger. So that was an innovative use of technology that spoke more towards what people in that area were looking to spend those discretionary dollars on. So it's interesting to think about some of those things in just a different way and who's really your competition, not other dentists necessarily.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's great because, if someone, dentistry is, depending on who you are, it has a different level of value. A Hollywood actress is going to have a different level of aesthetics that she wants versus someone who's working a blue collar job. And then not just in demographics, but the psychographics of the person. You talk about the psychology.
Oh, yeah.
One person might not have a career reason for wanting a nice smile, but then another person might have a career reason, but then still not care.
I tell you. And it's interesting, we're all victims of doing this in one way or another in our lives, is kind of doing that wallet biopsy, assuming what that value is for the patients. When it comes to the marketing, if you're using the right bait to attract the right fish, all those fish might look very different. And I can tell you from experience with Dr. Baird's office, we've been stiffed by more people driving a crystal blue Mercedes than we have the folks working in the pecan orchards. It's like you would just never know. But we know the message we're putting out. And the message we're putting out is that it's A+ clinical dentistry of course, in your area that you can afford, whatever it may be, you know. But it's one of those things, like, they came to us because we put this message out. Once they come in through that door, we can only assume that they're there because they fit a profile that we designed. So it's one of those things. We're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of those reactions, and that's what behavioral economics is all about. You know, it's how do you get out of that, fall back to the numbers, and trust the plan.
Excellent. Well, this is great stuff. You know, a great introduction to PDA, Productive Dentist Academy. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. Man, is there like a first step? I'm a dentist watching this show. Is there kind of a low commitment way, like some sort of like self-assessment on the website? Or
we try to go a little bit further, meaning that without looking under the hood, it's hard for us to give just real guidance. And more than anything, we want to be a trusted advisor. So what folks will do, and in fact, how I spend most of my day, is just doing what are called assessments, where somebody will call us, they'll set up a time, usually takes between 20, maybe 30 minutes, and I can build you a big, beautiful financial dashboard, pull that information out seamlessly from your server if you want us to. But more importantly, I really want to get down to what you're trying to do. What are you trying to build? What have you tried? And what are some strategies, with or without us, that you could put in place today to kind of help that move that dial and take better care of the people in your community? That's what I always recommend. And of course, as a thank you to the folks who are listening, if you ever want to come to our productivity workshop, which is our flagship workshop, the next one's in September, give us a call. We're going to do a 30% discount for anybody who listened, because we'd love to have you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. That's great. And man, I'm definitely going to have some of my clients check this out. I think this is an incredible resource. You know, and you've got Dr. Bruce Baird, who has a proven model. I know you're on the lecture circuit. Where can everyone find you? Let's just get the website real quick.
Yeah, and of course, it's just going to be productivedentistacademy.com. Of course, it's got all of our events. It's got some different resources, and most importantly, it's the fastest way to get a hold of me. But whether you're a scratch start, mid-career, looking to just do things differently, ramp up to sell, whatever it is, typically my first goal is to show people how we can slow the office down while increasing production. That's one of the things that breaks my heart about dentistry, is they believe that the answer is always more hours, more patients, more technology, more overhead, and it's just not true. Like, we really want to design a practice that they can live in and grow until the day they turn the keys over. So give me a call. I'd love to show you guys how we might do it.
Excellent, man. I think this goes really well with what I'm always trying to do. And the purpose of this show is to help dentists. And I just tell dentists, look, I'm not everything to every dentist. You know, I'm doing search engine optimization. We're building those websites. We're shooting those videos, doing the photography. But that is only one piece of the puzzle. What you guys are doing is huge. This is really huge. So thank you so much for appearing on the show, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And again, we really appreciate it. And we look forward to hopefully doing it again sometime.
Excellent. And tell Bruce, tell Dr. Baird, he's allowed on the show.
He'd love it. He'd love it. Between him and Vicky, like, we'll be here every week if you want.
we'll give it some time. Let's see how many people we get to sign up to the seminar. Maybe he'll be incentivized. But guys, if you have any questions, you know where to reach Chris. You know where to reach me. If you see this on Dental Town, Dental Marketing Guy blog, wherever you see this on social media, check this out on YouTube. This is really good information. And, you know, if you know someone who might be interested in learning a little bit of these tips, these ideas, these concepts, really good narratives here. I really like it, Chris. So feel free to reach out and ask any questions you have. Thanks for watching the Dental Marketing Guy Show.